Good evening once again. It's Monday night. It's 8 o'clock. And as usual, we have our Monday review show. Now, if you'd like to partake or take part in any way whatsoever, like asking a question or you'd like to make a comment, please do so. There's a little thing down there on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can put your comment in there, and Keith and I will do our best to answer it for you. Delighted to be joined once again by former Premier League, former FIFA referee, and former head of the PGMOL in England, Keith Hackett. Thanks again, Keith, for joining.
Pleasure. Good evening.
Keith, a couple of things I wanted to talk, and I did put it up on Facebook. Some people, many people, in fact, have replied to it. There was a couple of incidents during the week. I don't know if you saw them. Did you see the Manchester United penalty yesterday?
Yes, I did.
Yes or no?
I think that when you look at these decisions, there's a great deal of subjectivity in them. And what I feel is that this word "careless" in the law covers quite a broad spectrum. So I'm going to go with the referee and say that I can understand from his position, he's made the penalty kick. And to some degree, I also understand why VAR didn't come in, because they probably thought it's that tight a call. It's not clear and obvious. But then we saw later that same VAR not come in on the Martinez challenge, where the boot was in contact with the player's knee, a nasty challenge, certainly endangered the safety. So I think that when a goalkeeper goes down, he's got to take great care. Did he actually grab the feet of the player or not? And I think that, I'm not hiding behind the fact that if he hadn't have given it, I wouldn't have had a worry. If he'd have given it as he did, if we're talking about the same one, then I'm going to say, right, fine, because I think that the difficulty you've got is players moving at pace and acts of simulation. Yeah. And it at the highest level and even grassroots level, these decisions are not easy. But on the Martinez one, where this was a challenge where the flat of the boot came in contact with the knee of the opponent. There was a slight movement down then of the foot. Some claims that he was slipping. I don't think so. I think that particular challenge endangered the safety of a player. And Manchester United's Martinez should have received a red card. So
so we'll come back to that one in just a moment.
Yeah.
On the penalty, who was the referee? John Brooks?
Rob Jones.
Rob Jones, yeah. Very tall, very similar in stature.
Yeah.
He gave it immediately.
Yes.
Now, it seemed an awful lot worse than it was, because Hoyland went loop-de-loop, as they do. And as you rightly say, there is an awful lot of simulation. And simulation is blatant cheating, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
But so he went. But then with the slow motion replay, and VAR wasn't called into it, I think. With the slow motion, it did show that the keeper didn't get to the ball. He caught the player's foot. And of course, with nowadays, as soon as there's contact, and even sometimes inverted commas, contact, because the guy gets touched in the back and down they go. But there was contact with the player's foot by the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper didn't get anything of the ball, as far as I can remember. So from that point of view, I thought it was a penalty, and I would have given a penalty. And I thought the slow motion without VAR actually bore that out and confirmed that the referee was correct in awarding a penalty.
And I think that, when we look at this particular referee, Rob Jones, he's actually established himself now in that top three of English refereeing. he's got great stature. He's got presence. He moves around the field with a degree of ease. He communicates with authority. It's not, it's not. His conversations aren't jovial. I think they're effective. They're managing the game, managing players with authority. So there's a lot that I like about his role. That is why when we look at that Martinez, by the way, I supported his penalty kick decision.
Yeah, so I did too. A lot of people
I didn't have a problem.
Didn't agree, but yeah, and that's their right, and it's a democratic country, thank goodness.
Yeah, and he gave it with a great deal of conviction, and he gave it from a good position. There were lots to admire in that particular decision from the referee.
And he didn't call on VAR.
No, I don't think VAR didn't come in. It didn't require VAR. No. I think that it was a good call.
Yeah. On the Martinez one, Keith, and you've rightly said so many times, reckless, careless, or violent conduct. I don't think this could have been classified as violent conduct. Probably reckless, probably careless, just the way the boot went in. Having said that, and many people have said to me, but I've seen red cards issued for similar, almost identical situations. So where's the consistency? Where's the clarity on what is reckless or dangerous?
Well, I think that when we look at this, I think that particular challenge endangered the safety of the opponent. Now, this is where I think we can look at things in isolation. We can look at a video and we can come to a conclusion, whatever that is. What we have to take into account here is that during this particular game, and I was watching it, this particular player, Martinez, was unhappy with an earlier decision from the referee. And I think there was a degree of frustration in that challenge. Now,
and retaliation?
Yes. And I immediately said red, because I think that the boot it wasn't chasing the ball. The boot was high. It came into contact. Now I've heard Dermot Gallagher say, well, he was close to the opponent and there wasn't the excessive force within. But for me, this endangered the safety of an opponent. And for me, when a boot is that high and it's going in and it's forward movement, I'm not looking for speed. I'm looking for, has he endangered the safety of an opponent? And for me, I've gone straight red. Now, what then followed was I was waiting for the VAR to come in, because I think this is one where VAR should have come in and said, all right, there's an error here. If they knew the law and they'd been watching the game, and okay, they've got confidence in the referee, there's not a problem. But here I would have said, VAR, come in, let the referee have a second look, and then I think we know that the outcome would have been, I'm sure, a red card. I think what's interesting in this today, reading a lot of comments and listening to comments, obviously there's some people who believe he got that decision correct. Well, at the minimum, let me say it's a reckless, but it's more than a reckless for me. So when we look at it, and when you've got ex-Manchester United players, the likes of Neville, Roy Keane, Sue Smith on Ref Watch today, these people have a great deal of experience, and all of them said red card.
Did they? Yeah.
Yeah. So here, this is not. I want to emphasize that refereeing at the highest level is never easy. You and I know that.
You know.
If you take the Premier League, you've got 22 cameras, minimum 22 cameras, with some real high definition as well. And this ability to slow-mo replay these sort of scenarios. And yes, there's a degree of unfairness on the referee because, referees have got one pair of eyes. They've got players in front of them. They've got to move through distance and they've got to be in a good viewing angle to see it. Yeah. And this was like a flash.
Yeah.
And I suspect that, if there is any doubt in a referee's mind, you err on the side of safety. So from Rob Jones's point of view, did he see what we've seen on the replays? Answer, no. He's seen it once. You've got to have the ideal viewing angle for these things. And, ultimately at the end of the day, whilst I'm saying he should have had a red card, this player, I'm not actually slamming the referee. It highlights for me games of this nature within the Premier League. You would expect, and this is why we've got VAR, that there would be a rectification of a referee's decision on the field of play if there's a clear and obvious error. And I go back to the fact that I think that there's still confusion within the PGMOL as to what is a clear and obvious error. And I think they've raised the bar, and in doing so, they're missing some of the things. I would much prefer VAR, who's sitting in a room, says, wow, I think the referee ought to have another look. And if the referee has another look, in the same way that cricket and, they've got snicker and the tracking of the ball, all these sort of things, that technology is available. It needs to come into the game of football. And the public need to be involved in that process of examining the decisions. I'm quite clear. But on the day, Rob Jones has hopefully got one view. He hasn't. But that might only be an adjustment of a position by a yard to the left or right in order to get it.
Well, do we agree he got it right? I think he got it right.
Yeah.
It was a penalty.
Yeah. Oh, the penalty was absolutely spot on for me. I think Martinez's red card missed. He got away with one.
The Aston Villa goal against Spurs, which was the first goal of the game. Did you see the Spurs Villa game?
I didn't know.
Yeah. Do you know there's this issue, Keith? And I put it up. I put a video clip up on Facebook about this, as I did with the Man United penalty, where the amount of pushing and shoving and pulling and dragging and arms around, and I'm not touching you, but my arms are around, that goes on in the penalty area. I've mentioned this before as a suggestion, and I'd love somebody to take it to FIFA for the next time they do changes, that at corner kicks, as they have in certain free kicks, the players must be a meter apart until the ball is kicked.
Yeah,
Instead,
the
amount of times that the referee goes in and he's marching in, he's going to talk to the players, he's no sooner stepped back 2 or 3 meters when they're at it again.
Yeah.
So it's either one of two things. It's either a penalty kick to the attacker or it's a free kick to the defender. But it's how are they going to stamp out this pulling and dragging and pushing? And in my opinion, and I said this, the Villa goal should have been disallowed because the Villa player was actually in combat almost with the goalkeeper. Then he broke away, but he had in the keeper's view.
I don't disagree. I think the idea of operating defenders and attackers with a yard or distance between them is a good one, because I can remember when I was boss of the PGMOL receiving a telephone call from a legendary journalist, Hugh McIlvenny. His voice was distinctive. I knew immediately who it was on the phone. And we touched on and had this discussion, out of which the word grappling was highlighted, and we called it grappling. And you know, we had a bit of a clampdown. These clampdowns lasted 6 weeks, and then it drifts. For me,
sorry, Keith, just on that issue there. Why is it all guns blazing right from the start, and as you say, after 6 weeks, then it just disappeared? That's surely the problem of the referees that are not keeping.
I think that's down to the management scenario. You know, I think that for a period, you know, we took action, and then we probably had a 6-week lull, and then you saw it creeping back into the game. I generally think that this is a real problem for referees at all levels, because first of all, you know, I have to say that this tactic really originated when Jose Mourinho was the boss of Chelsea. I go back then when we saw him deliver blocking tactics inside the penalty area, literally crashing players out of the game, taking one out as though stumbled and fell on the player, or holding the player, doing everything possible not to give a penalty kick, but still having the impact. And, you know, I FIFA and, you know, the English Premier League and other leagues around the world and the IFAB, they've allowed, and the referees have allowed this just to happen. And I think at the moment, strength is outweighing skill. And we've seen already, haven't we, this? We saw last week where a player deliberately stood on the goalkeeper in an offside position, and at the point that the ball was being kicked, sharply moved away.
Yeah.
And you know, is he obstructing the goalkeeper? Is he preventing the goalkeeper from moving? The answer would be in the game, no, because, you know, and somebody said to me, well, the goalkeeper should push him out of the way. And I'm going, well, if the goalkeeper did that, you get the penalty kick.
He's in danger giving away.
It's the actually attacking player here that's committing the offence. So this is like a game, a tactical game between managers in terms of either effective man-to-man marking or zonal marking, with that clever tactic of blocking and moving away. And of course, within the law, are you going to penalise the initial obstruction? The answer is the space on a football field belongs to the players, and therefore he's allowed to stand where he is, and the goalkeeper might move or the player might move. That's the argument they put forward. But then this player, clearly it was a tactic, because he comes away from the goalkeeper, shot on goal, and he's not offside because he's not interfering with the opponent, because the goalkeeper has got a clear vision of the ball when the shot takes place. But we know that in the build-up to that, there's been that offence that is being ignored, blocking.
Yeah. I had a call today from a friend of mine in Cork, and he just wanted clarification. So I said I would put it on the show. Dangerous play, and what he was referring to was foot up or head down. So where is the dividing line between foot up and head down? Now, I was always told it's at the waist of the opposing player as far as a foot up is concerned, and likewise head down as far as the waistline is concerned. If you're down lower than that, you are actually creating the dangerous play incident rather than the opponent. Would you agree or disagree with that?
No, I think that's a good line. I think what we've got is we've got players with great agility now. We see overhead kicks, but we also see challenges where the boot is really high. And invariably in those situations, you're penalising the boot, the player with the boot high, rather than the player that's coming down. This is when there isn't that head movement downwards, where, you know, we've had instances where the player stood tall, but the boot has come in and he's caught the player. So for me, I think that we you know, a player has a duty of care towards his opponent. Sometimes they forget that. The laws of the game are there to protect the players, and therefore the reading and the guidance that you give is a good one. But for me, I think we've just got to measure that with the fact of looking at the player, and we can't use the word intent, but what we have to do is we have to go back to law and say, if that movement of the boot, is it reckless? Does it endanger the safety of an opponent? And in those situations, is there some excessive force with it, or force? And you know, there are times when I have seen red cards issued rightly. I've seen red cards not issued when they should have been. And rarely does the player who goes down head get punished. Rarely. Yeah, it's usually the boot is the one that gets punished. But it's great question, great observation.
VAR. I'm sure, like me, you watched most of the League Cup matches that were played, the Carabao Cup during the week. But VAR wasn't used. Now,
no.
Why is it not used, and why is it only used from quarterfinal stages on? And I have another question after that. Is there a particular reason for it?
I think, first of all, there's a limitation on manpower, and there's a cost parameter. You know, when we look at VAR and Stockley Park, invariably they use VAR in the Carabao Cup when it's at a Premier League club. That's when it, because the operation and everything is linked. Usually a game covered by Sky and various other things. I think generally the view is that they take this approach. I think the clubs are happy to, you know, see a cup competition as a means of less intensity, and it only gets intense if they get to the quarterfinal stage. You know, the same with the FA Cup. I mean, I just think the FA Cup should abandon completely VAR right through the competition. And in fairness, because again, we get to the latter stages of the FA Cup and VAR starts coming in. There's a cost parameter, there's a manpower, you know, consideration that comes into these decisions.
Now, to the smaller clubs, not lesser, but smaller clubs, lower division, I mean, for them to play a big game against one of the Premier League teams, VAR could be essential to them or detrimental to them, but they might say, well, this is our chance maybe to knock a big team out, and suddenly there's a controversial goal by the big team that's, let's use the word controversial, or maybe they have scored and it's ruled out. So, I mean, it's a huge game for them. And I understand what you're saying, and it's a bit of a rhetorical question because I mean, I know the answer. So from that point of view, as you rightly said there, perhaps it's best not to have any VAR in the League Cup or the FA Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tend to favour that. I think the one thing that I really worry about in the FA Cup is the fact that they've tinkered around with the tradition. Of course, the great thing about the FA Cup was extra time and a replay. And, you know, my own cup final in 81 went to a replay. The first game was a bore, 1-1. You know, for the fans it wasn't. For me, it was a relatively easy game. When it came to the replay, it was a midweek night match at Wembley, under lights. The atmosphere was different, tremendous, and was an outstanding game. And I think that, you know, for a smaller club that's drawn away, a non-league club in some instances, might be, it's great to have a top team coming to their ground and stadium capacity, but they get real money when a replay it takes place, and it's at one of the bigger clubs. And I just think that the FA, I know they worry about players and fatigue, but when we look at Premier League players, they've got squads of 45. Use them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they could nearly make up 2 teams. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There was something else I was going to ask you there. Yeah. Referees getting injured in a warm-up. How is that possible?
I don't know, because, Professor Matt Weston was the guy who was my sports science guy, who introduced the warm-up on the basis of all the things that are good for health, good for the individual. And, that warm-up now is traditional across the world. In most competitions, referees warm up. I even see it at the level that my club operates at. They go through a warm-up process. I think sometimes one of the problems is that I still get worried about the number of games over a weekend that somebody might have. A referee might well have been sitting in Stockley Park the day before, and all of a sudden he's out and he gets injured. For me, Errol, I think the big thing here is that if you're not 100% at a game, pull out. Don't run around carrying an injury. So rather than criticizing these referees, these things can happen. Hamstring, Achilles. It may be that, that they're coming back from an injury and the sports scientist has said, you're okay. They've done all the running bit, and then they do a bit more of, because the warm-up is quite an intense process.
Yeah.
You're getting your muscles warm and the heart rate up and all that goes with it. So I rather admire them when they do get injured, because they're looking forward to refereeing the game and make the decision to come off. Of course, they then invariably take up the 4th official role.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, is their warm-up too intense? And I wonder, are they trying too hard because they're out there in front of maybe a half-filled stadium, because the stadium is still filling up? And I wonder, are they trying to do too much to almost over-impress?
Well, the procedure, which starts off with a couple of jogging laps, is built around injury prevention. That's what it's there for. If somebody gets injured, then going to the ground and that evening before, they're carrying an injury, and it finds them out. So I'm not too worried about it. I think ultimately at the end of the day, at the top level, you've got fairly capable guys who can come in and referee the football matches we've seen when somebody gets injured.
Would there be ever a time when an assistant referee would take over in the middle?
Yeah, if you've got sometimes you can have a competition where, in a cup in particular, you might be bloodying somebody. But I think more or less now, at the very highest level, the assistants are assistant referees.
Yeah.
They're specialists.
Yeah.
They years before, they've made the decision, this is what I'm going to be. And then that's where all the training and the competence and practice comes into play. I can remember, I may have said this before, I can remember going to Southport because somebody had said, look, you need to look at this referee, kid called Glenn Turner. He was already with the PGMOL. He was an outstanding assistant referee. And I watched him at Southport, and the Southport secretary at the time said, I bet you've come to watch Glenn Turner because he's an outstanding referee. We admire him as a club. And I've gone, wow, that's a pretty good praise. He went out, and I can remember going into his dressing room and sort of saying, I really would like you to consider becoming a referee rather than an assistant. He chose to be an assistant referee, and he went to a World Cup. He went to many big games, and I tell you, his skill sets were outstanding. I used to watch some of the film clips. There was one that I remember, and it was a cross-field ball at Old Trafford, and there was a great camera shot behind his shoulder where there was a handling offence, and the flag went up without even hesitation. He looked at the referee, flag up, great penalty kick decision. And, those are the referees that you want on your, in your team, those assistants.
Keith, as always, thank you very much again. We've run out of time, and we'll do it all again next week, please, God.
Absolutely.
And thank you out there for watching, and keep your comments coming in, and I will endeavor to get around to them. Until next week, good night and God bless. Thank you, Keith.
Right.